Welcome back to this third installment of the Bureaucracy. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. So, this is the good stuff here. Now we're getting into the bureaucracy and policy making. This is going to be a relatively short video because I want to explore specific policies in class with my students, but this is going to be a nice little overview of how the bureaucracy actually influences and enacts policy making, right? So, we're going to talk about, again, we're coming back to this concept that I introduced in the previous video, which is iron triangles and issue networks, right? So you've got client groups, you've got Congress, you've got the bureaucracy. What are these things actually? These are, and there's a definition down here, a long-term working relationship between interest groups, bureaucrats, and Congress, or any other decision makers that happen to be floating about, right? Now, what's an example? So this is a Veterans Affairs triangle, right? So you have the Department of Veterans Affairs, that's the bureaucracy end, the House and Senate committees for Veterans Affairs, that's the Congress end. Then you have all these veterans groups that represent the interest groups end. Now here it's just like, okay, of course they're all talking, it's fine. What's the problem? What's the issue, Miss Blank? Like, what's your damage? Like, what are you so upset about? It's Veterans Affairs, right? And for the record, I am upset about nothing regarding veterans getting what they are owed, right? These people went and fought overseas or wherever they fought, right? And have risked their lives and have to deal with, and even after that, it doesn't end for them, with PTSD, with traumatic brain injuries, lost limbs. No one should begrudge veterans getting exactly what they are owed, and they are owed, quite simply, everything we can possibly give them, right? So the issue isn't the specific iron triangle. The issue is iron triangles generally and how they clog up government. And the job of interest groups is to do whatever they can for their constituency, for whoever they're fighting for, right? And sometimes these interest groups can come very, very close, if not actually becoming factions. So let's take a look at another example. So here we have the Department of Agriculture right over here, American Dairy Association, and Senate and House agricultural committees. So why are these iron triangles such a problem, right? Well, let's take a closer look at what this is, right? So from the American Dairy Association, they send personnel that are directly linked to them to work in the Department of Agriculture. They also send information, which informs the decision-making process of folks in that end of the bureaucracy, right? Now, to Congress, they give campaign contributions. And they say, hey, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, because if I give you campaign contributions, I'm going to get the price support I want. I'm going to get friendly laws, right? And in exchange for this personnel and information giving, they're going to get support for their policy agenda within the cabinet, right? At the cabinet level, right? And then, of course, between the Department of Agriculture and the Congress, you've got support for their budget. That's what they get if they do what these guys want. And these guys get expert information and political support. But of course, where's this expert information coming from? Oh, it's coming from the Dairy Association. That's where it's coming from. So the information goes here and then, of course, they get their campaign contributions and they basically do whatever they want. So what you see here is, unfortunately, instead of like this back and forth mutually beneficial relationship, it is clearly beneficial to the people working in these bottom two areas, but it's not necessarily beneficial to the American people. So here's another example. So, and this is a little bit more general. So from the interest group, you get electoral support for congressional folks. Then in exchange, they get friendly investigation and oversight, right, for their policies. Now, in exchange from the bureaucracy, they get low regulation and special favors, and from the interest group, they get congressional support via the lobby, because these guys are lobbying these guys to make sure these guys have good budgets, right? So in exchange, they're like, well, bureaucracies are self-perpetuating. If you give me my budget, I get to keep operating. I get to stay in business, as it were. So I got to give you that low regulation. I got to give you those special favors, because otherwise the money spout is going to get turned off and I'm going to find myself without a budget, right? So from Congress, they get funding and political support, and from the bureaucracy, they get policy choices and execution. So you see here this very incestuous relationship in this iron triangle. It's incestuous. And of course, the people benefiting the most are the folks in it. The people who are losing out the most are, you guessed it, the American public. Yes, sadly. Sad but true. Here's another example. So we have Tobacco Division of the Department of Agriculture, right? Congressional subcommittees, interest groups, right? So look at all this. I mean, it's craziness. So you've got approval of higher budget requests from Congress to the bureaucracy. Then in exchange, they get information, help with constituents' complaints. Pardon me. Then over here, from the bureaucracy, you get friendly rulings on tobacco production and prices, and from the interest groups, support for their budget requests, information about the industry. And then between the interest groups and congressional subcommittees, you get campaign contributions and support, information about the industry. And then, of course, legislation affecting tobacco members and other members of the industry is, of course, friendly to that industry. Incestuous, I tell you. So now the bureaucracy has some good points in terms of policy. There are some things we've been able to do that have been quite positive, namely Americans with Disability Act and Civil Rights Act of 1991, right? So we've had considerable deregulation of particular industries. That means we've lessened the burden. But we did have an increase in what has been termed social regulation, dealing with issues of discrimination, right? So the bureaucracy has done some good stuff, like in order to make sure that Americans with disabilities can, in fact, access things. Somebody's got to physically go into the building and make sure there's a ramp, make sure there's an elevator, make sure that these things are happening. So this is good. There's some good stuff that comes from it. It's not like it's all bad, but there are some very, very negative repercussions from, namely, these iron triangles, right? But this is an example of the positive end of it. And that, folks, wraps us up for video number 3. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I will see you in our final video, video number 4.